All right, next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So made.
Director France, second.
Second.
By Director Bullion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Before I ask for a motion, is there any board member or member of the audience would like to pull anything on the consent agenda?
Chair White, I'd like to pull 10C, the monthly financial report, please.
Okay, so 10C will move just after leaves of absence then on, right before resolution.
Can we pull 10A7, the monthly check detail, please?
Did you say A7?
10A7,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
All right, and that will come right after the financial report at the end then. If there is nothing else, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 10A7 and 10C. Is there a motion?
So made.
By Director Johnson, second.
Second.
By Director France. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we'll move down then and take the monthly financial report. Is there a motion to accept the monthly financial report?
So made.
By Director Atkinson. Is there a second?
Second.
By Director Johnson. Discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question for Director Frederickson on the February monthly highlights, which is on, I believe it's really the second page of the report, regarding our unassigned fund balance, which is estimated for February at 8.4 million, which is 6.86%, 8.86%. And then per our board policy 701.2, anything under 8% per policy basically says that as a board, we need to be able to review it and address it. And I just wanted to understand more about the fund balance.
Certainly. Thank you, Director Atkinson, Chair White, members of the board. As I have said several times in the past at several different meetings, one of the things that we don't really have a lot of control over in the district is our revenue streams coming in. And that's no different in this case. If you'll notice on the cash flow report, there is no property tax payment coming into the district in February. Last month, when we discussed the financial statements, we had anticipated having about $2.5 million of local property tax come in. That did not happen. There's 2 times during the year that the county does not send us property tax money. It's usually when they're collecting the property taxes. So in October, we typically don't get a payment, and then in March, we typically don't get a payment. So we were kind of anticipating a payment in February, which we did not get. However, we, as you know, in the levy process, we have levied for $20 million. That is exactly how much we're going to get by the end of the year in the levy. So as we discussed last month, we were anticipating our fund balance in February to be a little over 9%. And if you do the calculation, if we had gotten that $2.6 million in property tax payment, it would have been 9.1%, I believe. Because that didn't happen, the fund balance is sitting at 6.86. However, I can say if you look at the balance sheet, which I know we had a conversation last month about whether the balance sheet was a valued report to look at, but if we do look at the balance sheet from the end of January, you can see that the unassigned fund balance was $7.6 million. At the end of February, in your latest financial report, it's 8.4. So you can see that we have, in fact, increased the amount of unassigned fund balance that we have. Also, if you look at the cash flow report, if you look at the cash flow report from last month, we anticipated the expenses in February to be 11.7 million. But as we've also said, we have taken a lot of steps in trying to find efficiencies and cutting costs whenever we can. So if you look at the cash flow report this month, when you have the actuals for February, our actual expenses came in at $10.1 million, which is $1.5 million less than we thought it was going to be last month. So we, in fact, are making strides in finding efficiencies and cutting costs in the district. So again, I have, again, in the cash flow report, if you look at the year-end projected, last month in, if you look at the year-to-date projected, we were anticipating the net cash flow for the year-end to be a negative 2.4 million. If you look at it this month, it's actually a negative 1.4 million. And as you all remember, the board did authorize a $957,000 use of fund balance. So just in 1 month, we've gotten the year-end projected fund balance to improve, and we're less than $445,000 over what we have anticipated in our budget, and we still have 4 more months left. So I would like to just assure the board that we are in fact continuing to look at cost-cutting measures and that we will find whatever efficiencies we can. And I also just want to add that one of the things that is challenging is when you don't get revenue in perfect increments. We get money from the state at 1/10 of what our entitlement is every month for the state aid payments. The property tax comes in when, over the entire year. We get federal sources that come in after you spend the money. You apply for the federal revenue. And then we have other miscellaneous revenue that comes in sporadically. But one thing that we are not allowed to do is not pay our bills. And there is a Minnesota statute, it is 471.425, that actually says school districts must pay their bills within 35 days. So we can't, just because we didn't get property tax revenue, tell our vendors, we can't pay you this month because we didn't get the revenue. We still have to pay our bills. We also, I can just add that the way that we kind of pay our bills is we run accounts payable every week on Wednesday, and then twice a month we have payroll that comes through. And as soon as you run those payments, then we transfer money from our investment account into our bank account to cover whatever those are. And you also, in your board packet, get the investment statement every month, and you can see we still are sitting really really nicely in our investment account, that we are able to cover all of our payments from accounts payable and payroll every month. So I hope that answers the question. I can elaborate more if need be.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think the confusion was when it was stated last month, where you said by February we would be back to 9%, and then when I looked at the report this month, we're at 6.8%. So understanding that we didn't get that state revenue payment is, I appreciate you explaining that. Now, given our revenue is $2 million up to last year, where do you think our ending fund balance is going to end, just from a projection? So that, as a board, it doesn't matter to me so much month to month where we're at, because I understand that it does ebb and flow. I think the most important thing for the board to understand and for me to understand is, where are we going to be at the end of the year? Are we going to be aligned to our policy?
So again, if you look at the cash flow statement, and we're looking at, in fact, if we do end up with a negative 1.4 million, of which, keep in mind, about $1 million of that has been authorized, we're going to be sitting over 9, probably closer to 10% of our fund balance. But again, it's going to depend on some of those year-end audit adjustments that, again, we don't necessarily know what those are going to look like until the auditors are coming, which, by the way, the auditors will be here the last week in June to do their preliminary audit work. And then we have the end of July when they'll be here to complete all of the other work that they have. So we're anticipating we're going to be within our budget. And again, we've been able to show just in 1 month that we've cut the expenses by over $1 million. So we'll continue to do that. Again, I am anticipating that we'll be within our budget.
And then Director Frederickson, there was an adjustment though, because you had forecasted the teacher salaries flat to last year, but there was a payback last year. So that really, are we really cutting $1 million, or was that just a forecast?
It's actuals now.
No, I
So-
understand, but you're talking compared to forecasts, so I think just being real clear with our community about that is really
So
important.
that teacher payment was one time in February, and we have actuals now, so.
Right,
we
so
don't
that's where the change
anticipate-
was in
right.
expenses.
We don't have any anticipated additional expenses for the next 4 months of the year.
Right, thank you for clarifying that.
Anyone else? Any other comments, questions?
No, I just want to say thank you, Tammy. I know a lot of this was discussed last month. Also with the March actuals in here for the transactions and the totals from that was, and that shows where we are. So thank you very much.
Okay, if there's no more discussion. We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor of approving the monthly financial report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. And then the monthly check detail. I'll entertain a motion to approve the monthly check detail.
So made?
By Director Atkinson,
Second.
by Director Mason. Questions, discussion?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question about the payments for the mural at Prior Lake High School. So I saw there's 2 separate payments. It says first and second payment. What is are those final, or what is the total cost that we're projecting for that? And I would like to understand if that's being offset with fundraise
Sure.
and donations, or how much of that is coming out of our
Yeah,
fund
those
balance?
are our contributions through our A&I funding grant. That's going to be our portion of supporting that community mural project at the school for our students. And right now, we are working with students that are actively doing fundraising, as well as our partnership with the Prior Lake Rotary, who will be also bringing in resources to cover the difference of the mural as well. Director Oak, are we, was it, the total price, just around $18,000 is the total price, and that was our portion through our A&I funding that we utilized. The rest of it will be fundraised and supported through community.
So the portion, we're covering the 7,000, they will fundraise for the.
And other community components as well, in-kind support with organizations.
Is there a reason that we paid for this upfront without fundraising first, or are some of those funds raised already? I'm just curious.
Director Oak, you want to come forward, just questions around fundraising efforts to date, if you can speak to any of that?
So the work is being done through Student Council and the Student Advisory Group, and they're going to raise some portions of funds through the Culture Fair that they're putting on May 10th there. They're also connecting with different service club. Rotary is just one of them. They are planning to connect with the Junior Optimists and other service clubs as well. The $7,000 up front is because the artists have been working with our students already, coming in to meet with them, connecting with their ideas, coaching them on the type of visions that they can have there, connecting their ideas with what could be put onto the wall as well, with matching the colors and all that.
Okay, thank you.
I also just kind of want to speak to this. We've been working on this project for like over a year now. It's been like developing. We've been thinking about it and taking the different steps to get here. So we just really wanted to take initiative and get something done before class of 2025 leaves. And most of us who are leading the project and started it can kind of see it start to actually happen. So yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I'm just assuming we'll see the donations on the donation register for any of the donations that are
Correct.
coming in for that.
When the
as
additional
well. So
revenue
thank you
comes
for
in
the
for
generous
that,
donations.
we'll put those into our gift portion of our board meeting.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second on the table to approve the monthly check detail. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving down to personnel, Director Herman.
Thank you, Chair White, members of the board. We have a series of actions today. The first one starting with the voluntary furlough memos for any of our bargaining units that are 12-month employees to have a one-time option to select for a 3-day voluntary furlough. It is 100% voluntary with no obligations. Therefore, we have not counted this in any of our budget reduction projections to date, but once we have those final numbers, we will be adding that into our budget presentations moving forward. So the 4 MOUs you see today are in a connection with any bargaining unit that has 12-month employees.
Okay. And no action is required here, as far as I know. Okay. Any questions?
No, there's action for.
There is action
We need to
required.
vote.
We need to
Okay.
vote.
Sorry, I should have said Chair White.
That's right. Is there a motion to accept the voluntary furloughs
So made.
by Director France? Second?
Second.
By Director Johnson. Discussion.
Yes, I have a question. So, given the fact that this is really just the paperwork that says there's an option in order to take a furlough, I think originally this was budgeted $86,000 in our district. As you're tracking the furloughs, what's sort of the plan that will be put in place to come up with the additional money if we don't, for budget cuts, if we don't hit the $86,000?
Director Atkinson, the $86,000 was pulled out of our recommendations for cuts and assumed in other reductions that we've taken. This would be on top of what we've already proposed. So that was also a number, just keep in mind where we were mandatory making those furloughs. And so if we get 100%, we'd be in that ballpark, but I anticipate that we're not going to be at 100%. So once we get those numbers, that will be information that we'll share with the board and built into our budget reduction cost sheet moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it was clear during the budget process that I felt myself that this was sort of a Band-Aid. We did this last year, we're doing this again. I don't support the furloughs. I think we hire people, they expect to get paid for what they're hired for. And honestly, we need people working in our district. We have a lot of problems we need to solve, so I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none? Sorry, go ahead.
Logistically, how are we voting on this, please?
Just a standard vote.
Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, hold on a second. There's 12A, B, C, and D.
We're
So what are we?
we're only voting on one. We'll go down one at a time here. We're just doing A for this motion.
Thank you.
And there's a roll call request?
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Director Olsted.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Atkinson.
Nay.
Director Bullion.
Aye.
Director France.
Aye.
And Director Mason.
Aye.
And aye, that motion carries 6-1. Letter B, the probationary teachers non-renew. Director Herman.
Chair White, members of the board, I'd like to take an opportunity to provide a little bit more information regarding the non-renewal list. And I know that it looks quite extensive, so I just want to give a chance to explain a little bit more. So each year, school districts across the state of Minnesota face not only difficult challenges with managing the contract and the probationary statuses by licensure, but also budget reductions and performance. So by statute, any probationary staff member who has yet to receive continuing contracts, or otherwise known as tenured status, their contracts may be non-renewed by the board without an individualized action. So that's why you see all these on one memo to the board. Non-renews occur for a variety of different reasons, including licensure constraints, expired long-term substitute contracts, performance concerns, and then any reductions for staffing adjustments due to proposed budget reductions. These decisions are never easy, and they reflect a combination of legal requirements, strategic workforce planning, and then the ongoing efforts to ensure our students receive instructional instruction from appropriately licensed educators. So for one example, the Minnesota's tiered licensure system has 4 different tiers. The Tier 1 specifically requires us every year to non-renew an individual that's on a Tier 1 licensure. At that time, then we have to post the position for 60 days with the intent to try to find a fully licensed staff to fill that role. The vast majority of the time, actually every single time that I'm ever aware of in my career, we end up rehiring a Tier 1 teacher because of the unique aspect of that role, but it's just a statutory requirement that we have to follow through PELSB. Those are conversations that we have with every single individual that's on this list, specifically as to why they're on the list, and they also have the right to request the rationale and reasoning in it and in writing afterwards, and they're communicated with that process after the board takes action today. So I just wanted to make sure that the board and the community and staff are aware that there's multiple reasons why an individual can be on a non-renew list. And I'm happy to answer any other questions for that.
All right. Is there a motion to accept the probationary teacher's non-renew?
So made.
By Director Bullion, second.
Second.
By Director Mason. Discussion or questions? Hearing none. All in favor?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I
Jessica.
just, this is hard every year. And I just want to thank everybody on this list for their service to our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Olsted. Anyone else? Director
One of
Atkinson?
the questions I had is, are the positions that are listed in here, back in February, or actually it was in December, the board was tasked and approved making these cuts in our district, which was like 8, I don't remember the number of FTE. But does this list represent all the cuts that were made in December? Or will we see additional, or is this a full list?
Dr. Atkinson, Chair White, members of the board, it's a very complex process with the staffing process, so everything you see in the board packet today isn't a reflection of all those reductions, whether it's a reduction because it's a non-renewal or the next difficult memos they'll have to go through with the unrequested leave of absences. The differences between those two are the probationary status or the tenured status. And depending on what licensure is required for that, what sections we have to reduce based off of student enrollment, the registration, the budgeted FTE we have in each area. So the non-renewal list is part of that, but it's not the whole story either. We also have any retirements or resignations that we're then not backfilling, any full year leaves of requests that we have. We take all of those pieces of the ins and outs in the staffing process, and then at the end of the day, then we have to figure out how many probationary staff are we non-renewing, and then when we go to the additional difficult conversations is what tenured staff do we have to place on unrequested leave of absence based off of all those different moving pieces. So we frequently refer to it with the administration and the departments that work very closely on this as a very complex puzzle that we don't always know what the pieces look like as all these are moving around. But to answer your question, it's a part of it, and the whole story is in the board packet tonight. So we do not anticipate bringing forward any more non-renewals or ULAs with the certified teaching staff.
And this is a product of, as we've gone through and we've looked at enrollment, and the students have enrolled in their classes, this is the exercise that came out of that based on class size. Is that correct? As we've discussed in the past?
Dr. Atkinson, Chair White, members of the board, yes, that is accurate. So that is part of the piece, especially at the secondary level. The elementary level is, and early childhood, that's a little bit more either enrollment-based or the different student data there, but with the secondary specifically, we also have to look at which courses they selected and then what offerings we have along with the class size guidelines that the school board approved.
Thank you.
Chair White, if I may, and just, I also, and I wanted to share this before we had the conversations of 12B and C, or 12B, C and D, to Director Olsted's point, you know, as you all understand, our budget, 80+% of our budget goes to people. The people are our programs, and I oftentimes would say during the budget conversations that math doesn't teach itself, language arts doesn't teach itself, and kids don't feed themselves. Like, we have phenomenal people doing phenomenal work on behalf of our students every single day, and I also know how challenging these conversations are. It's never fun being in this mode. But we also understand that this is some of the reality before us right now that we're going to work through, and do everything that we can with the resources that we have to put everything that we can still in support of our students. And so I also want to thank all of our staff and our administration for working through this very complex situation of staffing, knowing the emotionality behind a lot of these conversations and decisions. I've had to work through it, as many sitting here tonight have had to work through it. In my career, I've been at the other end of this conversation, so I understand what this feels like, and I understand what this means, and I just want to express my appreciation for our community and our staff working through this as collaboratively as we can to ensure the best outcomes for our students.
Thank you. If there's.
Chair,
oh,
Chair
go
White, I
ahead.
just want to add one more thing, because I don't know that if I was clear on it. And as we go through these non-renewals and unrequested leave of absences, as things potentially change after this board meeting, if we get more resignations, more retirements, those type of openings come, these are the first people we go back to. Especially the unrequested leave of absences, they have contract rights to their position back. And then for the non-renewals, we that is our list that we go back to right away to try to get them back in our district.
All right, thank you. If there's no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next on the agenda is a resolution proposing placement of unrequested leaves of absence. Director Herman.
Thank you, Chair White, members of the board. This is the resolutions that need to be read independently and roll call vote on each one, starting with the resolution reducing and discontinuation of programs, and overall with the 512 communication literature teacher, the 512 German teacher, the 512 French teacher is the first resolution that needs to be read out loud, and then a roll call vote.
Okay. Let me find the place there. So then I need to take a motion to approve this. Is there a motion on the table?
So made.
By Director France. Is there a second?
Second.
By Director Atkinson. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent District 719, the following programs and positions or portions thereof will be discontinued. First, the 512 Communications Literature Teacher reduced from 1.0 FTE to 0.4 FTE. 512 German Teacher reduced from 1.0 FTE to 0.8 FTE. And the 512 French Teacher reduced from 0.85 FTE to 0.8 FTE. Are there any questions or discussion? Hearing none. This does require a roll call vote. Director Olsted.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Atkinson.
Aye.
Director Bullion.
Aye.
Director France.
Aye.
And Director Mason.
Aye.
And aye. That motion carries 7-0.
Chair White, members of the board, the second resolution is the resolution proposing placement on unrequested leave, specifically for the communication literature teacher, going from the 1.0 to the placed on a 0.6 unrequested leave of absence. Again, to clarify for the board and the community and the staff, these are areas where we had to make reductions that there weren't probationary staff members available with those licensures, and that's why we had to place them on unrequested leave of absence. For the board and the community to know, these individuals remain on the unrequested leave of absence a list for 5 years, where we will reach back out to them should opportunity present itself. This does require to be read out loud and a roll call vote.
All right, is there a motion to accept the resolution proposing placement on unrequested leave?
So made.
By Director Johnson, second.
Second.
By Director Atkinson. I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved, the School Board of Independent District 719 as follows. It is proposed that Kelly Dietzler, a 1.0 FTE teacher, be placed on 0.6 FTE unrequested leave of absence without pay or fringe benefits at the end of the 2024-25 school year, effective June 5th, 2025. Said action is taken in accordance with the 2023 through 25 collective bargaining agreement between the district and the Prior Lake Savage Education Association, and pursuant to Minnesota Statute 122A.40, Subdivision 10. The grounds for this action are as follows: lack of pupils, financial limitations, and discontinuance of position, namely a .6 FTE communication/literature teaching position. Be it further resolved that a notice of proposed placement on unrequested leave, together with a copy of this resolution, be forwarded to Ms. Dietzler. Is there any discussion? Questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. I'm sorry. Roll call. Director Olsted.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Atkinson.
Aye.
Director Bullion.
Aye.
Director France.
Aye.
And Director Mason.
Aye.
And aye, that motion carries 7-0.
Chair White, members of the board, the next resolution for proposal of placement on requested leave of absence is specifically for a German teacher at a 1.0 FTE being placed on a 0.2 FTE unrequested leave of absence.
All right, Chair will entertain a motion to, related to the resolution proposing placement of a German teacher on unrequested leave of absence.
So made.
By Director Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
By Director Bullion. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent District 719 as follows: that it is proposed that Mary Dooley, a 1.0 FTE teacher, be placed on a 0.2 FTE unrequested leave of absence without fringe benefits or pay at the end of the 2024-25 school year, effective June 5th, 2025. Said action is taken in accordance with the 2023 through 25 collective bargaining agreement between the district and the Prior Lake Savage Education Association, and pursuant to Minnesota Statute 122A.40, Subdivision 10. The grounds for this action are as follows: lack of pupils, financial limitations, and discontinuance of position, namely a .2 FTE German teaching position. Be it further resolved that a notice of proposed placement on unrequested leave, together with a copy of this resolution, be forwarded to Ms. Dooley. Any discussion? Hearing none. This also requires a roll call. Director Olsted.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Atkinson.
Aye.
Director Bullion.
Aye.
Director France.
Aye.
Director Mason.
Aye.
And aye. That motion carries 7-0.
Chair White, members of the board, the last resolution for proposal of placement on unrequested leave for the certified staff is the French teacher, specifically a 0.8 FTE being placed on a 0.05 FTE unrequested leave of absence.
Is there a motion to the resolution proposing placement of unrequested leave for the French teacher?
So made.
By Director Atkinson.
Second.
By Director Mason. Be it resolved by the Prior Lake, or by the School Board of Independent District 719 as follows: that it is proposed that Mary Boniface, a 0.85 FTE teacher, be placed on a 0.5 FTE unrequested leave of absence without pay or fringe benefits at the end of the 2024-25 school year, effective June 5th, 2025. Said action is taken in accordance with the 2023 through 25 collective bargaining agreement between the district and the Prior Lake Savage Education Association, and pursuant to Minnesota Statute 122A.40, Subdivision 10. The grounds for this action are as follows: a lack of pupils, financial limitations, and discontinuance of position, namely a .05 FTE French teaching position. Be it further resolved that a notice of proposed placement on unrequested leave, together with a copy of this resolution, be forwarded to Ms. Boniface. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, this also requires a roll call vote. Director Olsted.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Atkinson.
Aye.
Director Bullion.
Aye.
Director France.
Aye.
Director Mason.
Aye.
And aye. That motion carries 7-0.
Chair White, members of the board, we're now to the next set of action which is a resolution for reduction and discontinuing of programs and positions, specifically the 1.0 assistant principal, the 1.0 director of equity and inclusion, and the 1.2 FTE for Laker Online program. The Laker Online program reduction has already been accounted for in the non-renewals listed previously in the board packet, and the corresponding letters for the assistant principal reduction and the director of equity and inclusion reduction are included in the packet. This memo also needs to be read out loud with a roll call vote.
All right, the chair will now entertain a motion regarding the resolution reducing and discontinuing these programs and positions.
So made.
By Director Johnson, is there a second?
Second.
By Director Atkinson. Be it resolved by the School Board of Independent District 719 as follows, that the following programs and positions or portions thereof be discontinued. Assistant Principal at 1.0 FTE, Director of Equity and Inclusion at 1.0 FTE, and the Laker Online program at 1.2 FTE. Any discussion? Hearing none, once again, this requires a roll call. Director Olsted.
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Atkinson.
Aye.
Director Bullion.
Aye.
Director France.
Aye.
And Director Mason.
Aye.
And aye. That motion carries 7-0. Okay, next on the agenda is unfinished business, the new version of the financial report, cash flow report. Director Frederickson.
Thank you, Chair White, members of the board. At our last board meeting, I presented a requested cash flow detail report along with a summary report that was requested by the board. It was on 2 different pages, and there was a request that was made that on the detailed report, you would like to see the actual budget amounts, the annual budget amount, and a previous year-to-date to compare to the current year, which all of that information was on the summary report. So the request was to put them all on one page. So this is the new report combining those 2 the summary page and the detail page are now on one page. So as I understand it, that was the request. So this is the report that I'm presenting to you tonight.
I just want to say at the outset, I appreciate this. This, I think, captures, for the most part, the different positions that board members were taking. Again, my overall goal in, looking at how this is presented to us is to create less work for the business office and not more. And I'll continue to check with you to make sure that's the case moving forward, because that was certainly my intent moving forward. But I appreciate the effort. This is really good. Any other comments? Director France?
Director Frederickson, will this replace all the other detail reports, or will we still have the balance sheet? Can you just kind of give us a summary of that?
Yeah, it was my understanding from the last board meeting that there was no consensus on what should be added or should be removed. So at this time, we're just continuing to have all of the reports. With the caveat that the bank statement may be a month late because we just aren't going to have time to get everything done that we previously had been doing. So other than seeing a later bank statement, we will do our very best to make sure that all of these reports are included every month.
Could you do me a favor, just qualify that when you said all of these reports? I mean, we are adding these 2 additional reports and not taking something away?
Correct.
There's one report in here that is obviously manually created, and that's the monthly summary with your handwritten, or not hand, but typed, obviously. That is a repeat of a lot of the detail in here. I was wondering if the board would be okay with eliminating that one, since the totals are in all of the other reports. And again, in the interest of trying to reduce the amount of work and the redundant work that are in these reports.
Any comments, question, or, I mean, I think we get more than enough, especially with this new format, so I'm I'd be all in favor of that personally.
Yeah, I'm in sort of support of that as well. I think, and other people can chime in, I think the one thing that I would like to see is that when I started on the board, an overview of the finance report was part of a standing agenda item, and then somehow it got put into the consent agenda. So I think it would be really helpful with this report to become part of a standing agenda item, so that we could get just a brief overview. So if you're not writing it in the recap, sharing that with the community is going to help share some transparency around our financial situation. So having it as a standing agenda item is what I would like to see, as it used to be on the board.
I don't remember it ever, I know that.
It was, Chair France, I researched
We had during their study sessions, we would have a review, and we would get an update on the budget manually. But I don't remember any of these not being part of the consent agenda, except for when you were doing updates.
It was, just so you know, and you can, we talked about this in that
I'm
meeting,
actually
so.
asking Director Frederickson.
Yeah, she can share, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think so when I first got here 3 years ago, there was no financial statement done at all. So
Right.
when we started doing that, in the interest of helping the board understand what was all in the report, I think we included it in the financial update, but then at the request of the board at that time, said, yeah, we've got it now, we don't need you to discuss it every month. It's in the consent agenda, and if there's questions, I'll bring it up, which is why it got moved to the consent agenda.
Yeah, I personally don't see why it needs to be a standalone, as long as, you know, you can question anything on the consent agenda at any time. I think that would be an appropriate way to move forward. There's no reason to, in my opinion, to make it standalone. That's just me. As long as we still have the opportunity to question anything on the consent agenda, I think that should suffice.
Well, my specific question was the monthly highlights, because it is redundant. It is a manual report. I would be okay with that not being continued. The other detailed reports slice and dice the numbers 10 ways to Sunday. Whereas there's always some confusion with people who don't usually read a balance sheet or something like that. Still, it's represented in so many different ways that I feel that it's even without the monthly highlights, it's still overkill, and I would be okay with that. I don't know how the rest of everyone feels.
Chair France, are you referring to our community being confused about who doesn't read a balance sheet? Could you clarify who you're referring to being confused? I just want to be, be respectful up here. So when you say things like that, are you referring to it being confusing to our community?
Obviously, not everybody has a financial mind, and when you break the numbers down in different ways, I'm sorry if you took that personal. That
No,
certainly
I'm
wasn't
asking
my
who you're
intent.
referring to. So are you referring to our community? I'm just trying to get clarification of how we report the numbers, because we not only report to the board, who has a pretty good understanding of the numbers, and we look at it before we get we get these numbers a week prior, so we have time to digest it. So I'm really trying to understand, are you referring to when the community sees these as far as being confusing? One thing we did talk about is having that monthly report become a quarterly report. That's something that we talked about at the board table here as well. So that's something that
So is
could
that
propose.
is that a direction the board would be interested in going, to make it quarterly instead of monthly? That would
I mean,
kind of meet halfway as far as reducing the workload a little bit and still giving us a regular update that, some board members may be in favor of. Director Mason?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I support pulling that monthly highlights if it's manual and it takes a lot of effort. Absolutely, that's great. I would say though, I appreciate, I think every month that I've been on the board so far, we've pulled the financial report out of the consent agenda with questions. So I actually think the context helps for our community. Doesn't mean you have to put it in writing, but I do think it's helpful to just, highlight and explain a few things. So I would be for that too, as long as it's not more effort for you to just kind of verbally talk through it.
Anybody have a problem with going to quarterly on that? Okay. Any other questions regarding this particular document here? Okay. Thank you, Director Frederickson. Moving on to new business. The American Indian Education Parent Advisory Committee written statement.
Chair, point of order. We have the Finance Advisory Committee membership update.
Did I miss that?
14A, yes.
Sorry, Sam.
Almost there.
I have the printed copy that's not on, so, I will take it off to Dr. Thomas's computer here. We do have the updated Finance Committee roster. And then, so if, Director Frederickson, you want to just update the board on the proposed new members?
Sure, thanks, Chair White, members of the board. We had, obviously, new committee members from the board representing on our Finance Advisory Committee, so Director Atkinson and Director Mason are our two representatives starting in January. And there was a request that, because some of our Finance Advisory Committees, all of our committee members don't necessarily show up every meeting, so there was a request from the board that we open up for new members. So we did that. We got 6 applications. Director Atkinson, Director Mason, both reviewed those and identified 4 that we would invite to join our committee. They're on this sheet. We will send them an invitation to the next meeting, which is April 29th.
Action requested on this, or are we just gonna, no? Okay.
No.
Okay. All right, thank you, Director Frederickson. Now we'll move on to the APAC written statement. Director Oak.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Thomas, Chair White, members of the board. Every year, our APAC, our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, hold a vote for concurrence or non-concurrence. This year, the vote was held on February 25th. The vote was non-concurrent, so therefore a letter of non-concurrence needs to be shared and presented to the board. It was scheduled to be presented on March 10th. However, the letter wasn't ready at that time, so we are presenting tonight. After the letter is presented, we will have, as the board will have 60 days to do a reply to the letter of non-concurrence. So at this time, I would like to invite our APAC chair, Sierra, and members of the APAC committee up as well.
All right, thank you.
I'm extremely nervous. This is my
Don't
second
be.
time speaking in front of people. So, Buju Anin Anishinaabe, Duk Jawinikwe, Nindijnakas, Makwanindorem, Nindunjaba, Gawa Babiganikag. Hello, my friends and relatives. My name is Jawinikwe. It means Southern woman in my Ojibwe language. My English name is Sierra McAllister. I am Bear Clan. My family and I are from White Earth Indian Reservation. I live in Prior Lake. I am the current chairwoman of Prior Lake American Indian Advisory Committee, also known as APAC or PAC for short. I've lived in Prior Lake for 28 years. I went to 5 Hawks Elementary, Hidden Oaks Middle School, and was the first 9th grade class in Prior Lake High School. I volunteer my time at 5 Hawks in the classrooms and field trips from time to time and when needed. I'm an assistant coach of my girls' travel basketball teams for the last 5 years. I've also coached the in-house volleyball teams for the last 3 years. I don't mean to make this speech about race or anything like that, but I'm here to tell you a little bit about who I am, and my journey at the Prior Lake Savage schools, and the change that is coming. I think it ties into building together as a community. Living in Prior Lake, or living and going into a predominantly white district wasn't a struggle for me as a child in elementary school. Back then, young children didn't see the difference in skin color, hair color, or eye color. They just see friends to play with. I was the only mixed Native black and white girl out here at the time. As I got older throughout middle school and high school, more students of different nationalities joined. That's when I realized that I was different. The comments about my hair, skin color, and where I lived before turned me into an outsider. Friends I once had judged me based on the color of my skin and turned away. I had a son at a young age, and I wanted different from him. I have 2 additional daughters now and teach them all to speak up for themselves and others. I teach them the importance of coming together as a family and a community. I always lose my place because when I look up, I look back down. I dove in and I'm teaching them everything I know about my Native American culture as they grow. I join APAC meetings out here in hopes that to give my kids a sense of belonging, because back then, when I was their age, I didn't have other students who looked like me. I witnessed the many different Native coordinators come and go with little help from our district. Very little education in our community about Native injustices and other than what's read in our textbooks. Now I'd like to dive into the APAC's letter of non-concurrence. I'll not be reading it word for word because the district already has the letter in full detail. Just touching on some key topics here tonight. Dear board members and Dr. Thomas, the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, APAC or PAC, for the Prior Lake School District cast a vote of non-concurrence in the district with the district's Indian Education Program plan for the 2024-2025 school year to attest to our belief in the school board and district are not in compliance with the Minnesota law and are not meeting the obligations of the Native American students in the district. We submit this letter, which requires that the reasons for non-concurrence and recommendations shall be submitted with resolution of non-concurrence. The PAC first wishes to acknowledge that this year has included some positive events. These include the hiring of the liaison to assist the work of Freddie DeLeon, the district's American Indian Student Support Coordinator, and serving our students, hiring tutors for middle school students, sustaining regalia making and drum and dance sessions during the school year in the evenings, working with and being supported by Sam Oak, a presentation by Mr. DeLeon to teachers during the in-service training event that occurred on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in February. The student group at the high school, the Native American Student Coalition, which was founded in 2022, continues to be active and plan important events that celebrate their identity and enable them to share their culture with their peers, enriching the experience of all students and staff who engage with them. These events include the Bridge Walk Community Cultural Fair, and for the first time to our recollection at the Prior Lake High School. A student-organized powwow was held at the Prior Lake High School last month. Unfortunately, the PAC's concerns, requests, and recommendations remain much of the same that has been repeatedly expressed in the letters of non-concurrence issues over the last several years. Since at least 2022, the PAC has issued specific requests to which there has been either no response or inadequate response. Such unanswered requests are as follows. There will be an administrator appointed to work with it and address issues and requests raised in oh my God, stumbling over my words. Raised in the 2020 letter. It is not particularly productive for the process in which the PAC and the district engage and limit it to a single annual letter and single response. The PAC desires some dialogue and action as we partner with the district to address the needs of our students in our Indian education program. Native students' well-being and graduation rates improve when they are exposed to cultural languages. $11,000 of our funds were used to pay with the district ran Native language class. If the district is supplementing the class, the district should be paying for it and not supplanting it into our funds. We are seeking some clarity on expenditures made from this year's budget, and I therefore request a copy of the accounting for Indian education program for the last year as soon as possible. The issue of how funding is being spent is an ongoing issue for each new APAC committee. sorry, BB. There is little to no input from the APAC taken into consideration when decisions are being made on how funds are spent. Previous committees have requested budget updates and detailed expenditure reports, to which we have either been told we are not entitled to the information or that we have to pay for it. Upon paying for it, we have been given redacted expenditure reports. It is the APAC's committee request that we be freely provided with the budget update and expenditure tracking each of our APAC meetings going forward. As we identify the specific concerns that led to the vote of non-concurrent this year, we will embed our recommendations in the paragraphs included specific reasons to the statements that the district provided in its response to our letters in the 2022-2023 and the 2023-2024 school years. Areas of concerns for the educational success of Native American students in this district includes the following. The achievement gap. The PAC asserts the achievement gap between Native students and the majority of the students in this district is an important measure of whether the district is meeting its statutory obligations to our students. We do not see data or information that shows this gap is narrowing. We therefore recommend the district to develop a strategic plan that outlines what steps the district is taking to address and reduce the achievement gap. Curriculum development. The district has responded to this by not fulfilling plans set forth in the response letter dated July 8th, 2024, where they stated, we hope to work closely with the APAC and increase representation in our district committee as our Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee and our Educational Equity and Excellence Advisory Committee. Having APAC representation on these committees will help parents of Native students learn about the systems and activities we have put into place, address various needs across the district, including reducing achievement gaps, cultural representation, economic disparities, and other challenges facing our students. District Advisory Committee. Each student board must establish an advisory committee to ensure active community participation in all phases in planning and improving the instruction and curriculum affecting state and district academic standards consistent to subdivision 2. Bullying and harassment. Students continue to experience unacceptable instances of racism, bullying, and harassment tied to the identity of Native individuals. While we understand that there has been a topic of one of this year's schools carrying and committed conversations, we recommend expanding a proactive discussion about respecting peers to a broader student population. We are aware that there may be opportunity for the district to engage in consultation to receive guidance on improving academic outcomes for Native students through the Every Student Succeeds Act, also known as ESSA. The PAC recommends that the district determines how to engage in the ESSA consultation to facilitate achieving our shared goals. We must emphasize that the district has obligations pursuant to state law, as well as access to resources available through the Minnesota Department of Education, that we are more committed to ever to supporting our students. It is also crucial that the district understands that the obligations to Native students derive from the sovereign existence of our tribal nation, and thus Native American students are the district group based on political classification and not a racial classification, such as must not be swept into the anti-DEI policy framework. And this is my first time coming to a meeting like this, so I didn't know that I should have came to the 15-minute
No, you're fine.
sneakage. So I'm just going to continue to go because I worked hard on this. So I also want to speak on the elimination of the Director of Equity Inclusion position. Letting Sam Oak go from the position will be going in the wrong direction here at PLSAS. He was the only one getting to know our program, parents, students, and willing to help us, along with Dr. Thomas. Sam's position as Director of Equity and Inclusion is helping and he has done amazing things in our community already. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not about gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, background, disability, culture, age, or mental health. It's about all of us. Diversity ignites creativity, problem solving, and innovation. Equity is fairness and inclusion of all students. Inclusion promotes belonging, purpose, and well-being. It is the vision of a better world for all of our children. The PLSAS commitment to equity and inclusion on the Prior Lake Board website states it the best. I was going to state 5 of them, but to cut things short, I think we know where we're going with that. Community is about coming together and celebrating our differences regarding size, age, color of our skin, or where we came from. We need to go beyond words on a paper, beyond us. Oh, jeez. We need to go beyond words on a paper, beyond a speech at the beginning of a presentation or event, and take action. It is important to keep Sam Oak in the Director of Equity and Inclusion position to help us continue to encourage cultural understanding and break down the communication barriers. We look forward to working with the district in a collaborative manner to improve and support the health and well-being and academic success of Native students here at PLSAS in hopes of coming together in unity as one. Thank you for giving me this opportunity here today. Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is policy, and we have a
Chair
series.
White,
I'm
can
sorry.
I,
Yes, you
is
may.
there allowed any discussion?
You may have, if you have a question or a comment. Absolutely.
The 60 days response, so what are the next steps? Should we be talking about that, or Director Oak?
So, sorry, you want to, or you want me to speak first?
Well, no, go ahead.
Okay.
The board has already taken one step in what we've said, and that was the elimination of the position that Sam Oak currently has. So as we've stated, that is a step backwards in the progress that has been made over many years and partnership that the APAC is trying to build. Chairman White, you said, were there questions or reasons for the elimination of the position? Was it purely
No,
financial?
I was asking the board, I got a question
For the
from the board, and I
conversation.
was wondering if there was, I forgot to ask for comments or questions regarding what we just heard, and that was my bad. So that's,
So
ahead.
Director Olsted, to answer your question, when we receive this letter, we sit down as an administrative team. We'll begin tomorrow morning as a senior leadership team to reflect on the conversation that we heard this evening. Several of us have key aspects and connections to some of the concerns that were expressed, either tonight or even dating back to 2020, which is something I'm curious to understand. I appreciate you including the anecdotes. I wasn't around then, but I understand the connection point that you're making back there so that we don't repeat that history, so thank you for that. And as I shared earlier, our commitment is to ensure that within the 60-day time frame that we develop a response to the concerns that were laid out, that in partnership with APAC would be able to inform how we'll be moving forward beginning next year. So as we move forward to have stronger concurrence with APAC. So that's the process that we go through each year, you know, when we hear the concerns. Director Oak, is there anything else you want to add?
I think just
process?
along that process, then we'll be meeting with groups of you at a time to go over the statements as well to get the final statement down. And then after that, before the 60 days, then we'll present it again at the board meeting in terms of the response there, and then that will be delivered to APAC.
And then based upon what we develop with those responses, that would also be something that I and others would be sitting down with the APAC then next year to identify what does the plan of success look like moving forward to ensure that we can meet concurrence or at least begin to address some of the concerns expressed tonight and or some of the ones that are historical as well.
Thank you. Director
I have
Atkinson.
a question, yeah. So I've been on the board 2 years. We've been non-concurrent both years. The theme, a lot of the same things, we continue to repeat ourselves. And I know one of the things that we talked about last year was having representation on the Teaching and Learning Committee. Do you have any feedback on, like, did you guys participate in that?
Freddie De Leon participated in that, as it was spoken to in the statement here and
Okay, so.
earlier in the meeting.
Yeah, and he's wonderful. He's actually, my student is in his Dakota language class, and that's like an incredible class, and he does such a great job. So, the other question I have is, there's surrounding districts?
And
Yeah,
it was,
I'm sorry.
me and the other chairs, we like took turns rotating, but like this next year, we just wanted to incorporate more parents, the APAC parents versus not just the board members.
Yeah, and there's a really great group of parents on the Teaching and Learning Committee, and that's the whole point of the committee, is to have a representation of parents and community members on that committee, giving diverse viewpoints on how it impacts our total community. The other thing is, we have surrounding districts that are concurrent. And so is there anything that other districts are doing that we can do better? I mean, I know you spelled some things out in your letter, but I mean, obviously, it's disappointing.
Good question.
It's
Ms.
disappointing.
Atkinson, have you
Yeah.
met with the other boards to ask them what they are doing to get concurrence?
No, I mean, I think that's something that we need to explore.
Work that I would suggest,
Yeah.
that we would suggest that you do.
Yep.
And we'll be going to one of them.
Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Because the letters, I've been part of the authoring of them, and all these families have, that it's been pretty clear and laid out very simply that do these things comply with the Minnesota state law, the treaties of the state of Minnesota, and then our vote will be concurrent. But specifically, if you want to see the number, there's an achievement gap where you look at academic achievement of Native students and that is equal on par to all other students in Prior Lake, then I personally will vote yes. And until then, I will vote no as a parent of Native students in this district.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I just have a quick comment. I want to thank you, Sierra, for sharing your story. I know it's one familiar to myself and a lot of my peers, and it is still happening. So a lot of the things like you talk about here, they are still happening, and like we can see that. Like I know that, and we all see that as students. And the work that you, Mr. Oak, have done, and your department have done for this district is like undeniably life-changing. Like I can say that because it's changed my life. So thank you.
Changed my daughter's life.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, appreciate it. All right, moving on to policy, we have 10 policies, 801, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 09, 10, and policies 902 and 903 for a second and final reading. I will take a motion to accept all of them as one motion.
So made.
By Director Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
By Director Atkinson. Discussion.
I would like to pull 903 out of that.
Sorry, I should have asked that first, my bad. And I'll ask for an amendment to that motion, separate with 903. Is there a motion to amend?
So made.
By Director Atkinson. Second.
Second.
By Director Johnson. Any discussion? Okay, hearing that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So then we will go back to the original motion to approve the first 9 then on the list. Is there any discussion regarding those 9?
On the 9,
I'm sorry, the first 9. We pulled 903 with the amendment.
right, the
So-
9, do you want
so-
to discuss 903 now then, or?
We'll approve the first 9 on the list, and then we'll discuss 903
Okay.
separately.
Okay.
So, if there's a motion and a second on the table to approve 801, 803, 804, 805, 806, 807, 809, 810, and 902. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries at 7-0. All right, policy 903. I'll entertain a motion to approve policy 903.
So made.
By Director Atkinson, second.
Second.
By Director Johnson. Discussion.
Yes, the first question that I have is on the, first of all, I want to thank the chair for pulling the piece about the communication out of the board policies, because it didn't belong there, the 200s anyways. But the revision of the appropriate communication, was there any discussion of bringing that through legal at all? This doesn't seem enforceable. Communication piece of policy 903.
Director Franz, Chair White, members of the board. We did not discuss bringing this forward. When we discussed, Vice Chair Bullion, Director Johnson, and myself, we were looking at the language, trying to find ways to make it clear what the appropriate communication was in alignment to, and the conversation that we had fell back to like talking with the signs of what we are looking for with positive behavior intervention strategies. So we aligned it with the district strategic plan around like respectful, unity, safe learning environments. From my perspective of the language, I do not feel like we need to seek legal counsel. I would say that we would implement this policy the same that we currently are. If somebody is acting disrespectfully, if they're creating an unsafe learning environment, we would act in the same way that we have always, including the consequences for the behavior, including like ending the conversation, recording the incident, all those same aspects. So as Vice Chair Bullion, Director Johnson and I talked about it, we were trying to align it with something as Dr. Thomas said, that the strategic plans are North Star, really bringing it back to that to have what we expect and what our core beliefs are, and then we will, I don't see us implementing anything differently than we have with this policy moving forward. And I think that we, even without, as we talked about the last boarding, even if we did not have this policy, I think we would still be well within our legal grounds to terminate a conversation, document that conversation, call police if somebody was acting egregiously. We would still have all those rights. This just helps add that layer that I'll ask Dr. Edwards to speak to from the principal's perspective for staff and principals and building administration to really lean on, to really have it spelled out for everyone involved on what happens if you're not acting in alignment with our core beliefs in the strategic plan.
Yes, and I would say that the listed courses of action, should there be occurrences that are in conflict with our strategic plan and our values and beliefs, I think that this gives adequate range of action steps to take. And gives us something to point to as to why.
Okay, so strategic plan, aspirational, visionary, non-specific. Policy, much more discrete, specific, something we can actually work off of. They sit subordinate or below the aspirational statements. I've never been part of an organization that didn't spell this out. To say things like, the shouting and yelling, using obscene language, using insulting or demeaning language, and then going through physical threatening, you name it, as examples of inappropriate behavior, to take that out and say, okay, we're going to recursively go from a policy level up to a strategic plan, is not necessarily enforceable. And if we're going to do that here, our entire 500 series for students discusses appropriate behavior also. an appropriate dress. So would we take that and tell our students, we're going to get rid of all the detail here of examples of that and just say, please behave according to a strategic plan, which is non-specific, fairly nebulous, and again, aspirational North Star that does not spell any of this out. I've 30-some plus years in corporate, nonprofit, and other educational institutions have never seen it recursive or basically circuitous back up to, you know, a mission and vision statement to an organization. They usually provide some sort of examples of what would be appropriate communication in here. That's my concern. And if there isn't appropriate communication and you're doing one thing for the adults and another thing from the students, that could potentially be an issue too.
Director France, I do recall we had a lot of conversation around this policy at our last board meeting. And one of the things that I recall is the difference between student speech and adult speech. And there's different laws that actually protect student speech versus teacher speech in our district versus adult speech. I also recall a conversation about being this communicating a positive message versus being appropriate versus inappropriate. And we talk about appropriate communication, then we talk about all inappropriate communication. So I'm fine with the way this, with the way that you guys put this together. I think it's fine. I mean, we all are aware of what our strategic plan is, and as long as, you know, like I said, I'm fine with the way this is written, so.
Well, I remember the conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Herman, that there was some confusion about the definition of shouting and yelling and who considered something as obscene versus, so instead of defining that or using industry standard language, which this is, we went even more nebulous, which makes no sense. And student didn't really come into play here since the scope had nothing to do with students. So I'm a little confused, and I know that if I was sitting on a corporate board, bringing this back up to even higher level of non-definition would usually be a red flag legally, even though you can say, we've always done it this way, all that. When the policy becomes this broad, it also becomes harder to enforce. And the original purpose of having that pulled out in one of its own policies, although I didn't agree it belonged because it's not a board policy, it's a district policy, is that, you know, it's protecting our staff as well as parents that come around. So you want to have some sort of definition of what is appropriate behavior and communication. So that's why I'm concerned and why I would not, in my professional opinion, I would not assume that this would be enforceable, particularly with the consequences. So I am concerned. I understand there's a way we've already done it and it's assumed and all that, but given the communication of having the tenants, what I thought was fairly common sense, the board seemed to be confused about the definition of it. So why would we take it up to a higher level, more broad definition?
Chair France, I think if I go back and I remember the conversation, I think the concern is who determines what's appropriate or inappropriate. Where somebody may think one thing is appropriate, somebody else might think something is inappropriate. And that's where that First Amendment right gets really tricky. And so I think in this example, that keeping it more general actually will protect us, to be honest with you.
Actually, I think
From a First Amendment stance. So I understand why it's written the way it's in, and that's why I said I do appreciate the way it's written, so.
And I believe that the way it's written allows people to actually perform these things which are clearly inappropriate and then say there's no policy on it. That's what I'm worried about, and I would just be blunt. Because we've had this happen, and it's very important that we do keep more prescriptive examples of this for adult behavior. And I'm asking Director Herman about the thing that you really believe that this would be legal, that we could still use this even though we're taking it out of the policy and still have it be enforceable. That's what I'm concerned about.
Director France, members of the board, as I stated previously, I feel that we would still implement the policy the same that we always had. If someone was shouting, yelling, using foul language, we would implement the same exact policy. I don't see that changing. But again, that's my understanding and my partnership with two of the board members to draft this language based off of the board's conversation. So I just would redirect your question, to the rest of the board members, because from my stance, that's how I would view the language and implement it and support the administrators on implementing it. But I also understand that there's the will of the board, and I'm happy to support that.
Director Bullion, you had something?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, as Director Herman and Director Johnson and myself collaborated, this is what we came up with. I understand having, if there is, in other policies, we have examples of things that we're talking about. So I do understand the point being made by Director France. And I think I'm just asking Chair White, would it be something that we, the examples given, so we rewrote the paragraph as shown in red. Would it be helpful if we just went through and got will of the board, board director by board director, on whether to keep the examples in or remove them? I also understand that what inappropriate is subjective. But we do have in other policies where we do give examples. And the goal of policy is to support the staff, it's to support. And we want to make sure that we are offering the most support. So I think we could talk about the pros and cons. I think I'm just asking if we should just get will of the board to leave the examples or to have them removed. We did, I think, the reworking of the language above it. I think we could just get will of the board.
Yeah, because from where I sit, I hear you, Mary, I honestly do. But the sentence below everything that says the building administrator will be authorized to interpret would carry no matter what we have here, it seems to me. And if administration and the members of the policy committee are comfortable with this, I would tend to be as well. But I'll put it like this, is anyone uncomfortable with not having these examples listed in the policy? Because it really comes down to that. It seems like everything else is been agreed upon. So is there any disagreement with pulling everything that's been redlined 1 through 5 and then 1 through 5 again, or 1 through 4? Anybody can go.
I'm okay with it. It references also the Minnesota statute, which defines the disorderly conduct, so I feel like that from a legal standpoint is probably.
Well, I've just, from the number of years that I've been on the board, we've had parents send in some interesting emails to teachers. I personally have witnessed some of this behavior, and I'd like to be able to not have any gray zone in it in order to support our staff, as well as parents. We've had issues where parents have also been in the same area on school property and visitors to our school district. And so while I do appreciate the fact that the administrator who this gets brought up to would have the discerning capabilities to take action, not having these examples of the behavior in here, I think does leave a gray area that makes it a little uncomfortable for me, to say the least, especially given what, you know, we've experienced here over the years, or I know I've experienced here over the years or been witness to. Personally, I haven't been, but I've been witness to it.
Chair Franz, members of the board, again, to reiterate, I think unfortunately, as much as we try to be clear with policy, whether we had examples or not, it wouldn't be an all-inclusive list. The examples also could be, somebody brought up at the last board meeting, what does yelling and shouting mean? To one person it might be different, to the other person it might not be. I think in these situations, we have a very, very low risk because any of these behaviors aren't impeding on their First Amendment rights. And from a legal standpoint, we're really just ending a meeting, we're documenting it. If we are calling law enforcement to come help, they are the ones that take over that. They take on that liability. This just helps provide that extra coverage for individuals, especially at the school level, to point back to policy that appropriate communication is expected and inappropriate communication will not be accepted. And I think from there, we would navigate all of those quote unquote gray areas, as you said. And again, regardless if we have examples or not, I feel like that will become an issue because people will argue the examples or argue that something that we deemed inappropriate is not listed as a specific example. So those are kind of the conversations that when Vice Chair Bullion and Director Johnson and I were looking at the language, we couldn't come up with an all-inclusive list. We couldn't define everything to the point that everyone would completely agree with it. So instead, we specifically talked about what was appropriate, and then we talked about that inappropriate will not be accepted. And again, if it gets to the point where we're calling and it becomes a legal issue, that would not be us determining that. That would be law enforcement determining that. And to Director Mason's point, in alignment with the statute that's listed there. So again, I don't have concerns with the ability for us to continue to utilizing this policy, to Vice Chair Bullion's point, to support our staff, administration, and students to ensure that we do not have people in our schools, whether they're visitors, parents, community members, that are acting inappropriately.
Okay, I have just one more question, because this is another concern. Sorry, don't mean to, hate to say beat a dead horse, because I like horses, so. There are no all-inclusive lists, and that's usually brought out in the majority of policies. Most of the other school districts do have a policy with examples in it. It's not meant to be all-inclusive. You can't do that in anything that we do. But one of the reasons why you don't simply rely on a statutory reference is because when you're communicating these policies to the public, you're not expecting them to understand all the time or be able to go out and read, a statute and understand all the intricacies of the statute, as well as the court interpretations of that statute as it's challenged. So that's why there also are examples in here so that you have a baseline a baseline from which to start off on. And with that, I understand it's the will of the board, but I simply have never been in a workplace, a nonprofit, or any of the other educational boards that I do sit on that didn't have these examples in there, and there's a reason why, so there is less gray area, even if they can't be all-inclusive.
All right, thank you. I'm fine with leaving it personally, so I don't know if we want to keep having, you had a comment though, Director Johnson, before we move on.
Just one thing. And we really wanted to emphasize the strategic plan here. It's getting put into all the schools, so hopefully, right, if there are any visitors to the building, the students, as it gets implemented even more throughout the year, all of these things get lessened, right? And it's taught throughout the community. It's going to be more prevalent throughout the community. And then the issues that you're raising, I understand. I get it. I appreciate that you're raising them. But the words that we have on the strategic plan were done by the community. And that was, I think, our thought process on there, is that we had a very large group, a very robust group of individuals who came from the community that put it in there, and that was our thinking. I think we spent probably an hour and 15 minutes, and 55 of those minutes were spent on this alone, and
Right.
that's it. So I'm happy with the way it is.
Okay, and not to cut off discussion, but are you two, I'm assuming you're good with it?
I'm fine with the way it's written. Thank you.
Amy?
I'm fine.
Yep. And Director Olsted?
I appreciate the work put into this, and never an easy job. I just, the sentence about the communication that must align with the core beliefs in the district's strategic plan, I just don't see that as realistic. I don't think a mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, neighbor emailing a teacher or calling a teacher is going, before I do this, I'm gonna go online and look at the strategic plan. That is not a diss to our strategic plan at all. I don't look at that part of the sentence as being realistic.
Okay, appreciate it. Director Herman?
Director Olsted, members of the board, respectfully, I also would like to say I don't think that they look at our policy either. It's really when after they send something like that, then we are able to point to policy to let them know that this is an unacceptable behavior that we will not be tolerating, and then have those conversations to set those expectations of what is appropriate conversation or appropriate communications in those situations. So I completely agree. It's unfortunate that not everybody has all of our policies and strategic plan memorized. But it's also not an expectation I think is realistic, and I completely agree with you on that. It's our ability to point to something, to have those lines drawn in the sand, and also to help communicate proactively and reactive when these situations occur.
Just one more comment to piggyback on that. When we were discussing and we chose to put in the district strategic plan into the policy, that was also an understanding that the strategic plan usually has a 5-year shelf life, that it's something that will transcend, this specific strategic plan. So I agree with you as well, Director Olsted, and I do think that, when I think about from what our strategic plan was, it was very wordy and it was very large to what it is now, and the efforts that the district is bringing forth to have it be a living, breathing document, that it's not just, doesn't just sit on the shelf, but it actually goes into the classrooms, which will help it spread out into the community. It's not something that we can just flip a light switch. It doesn't happen as fast as maybe the creation of the strategic plan was, but it is through all of our efforts together that we all start treating each other in the manner in which our core beliefs state on the strategic plan, and hopefully that ripple effect continues to grow.
So in that light, are we going to be consistent and take the policies in the student handbook out? Since this only has to do with adults, for the most part, are we then going to tell students they're not going to give examples and we're going to have them abide by the strategic plan?
If I could just interject, I would suggest we discuss that
Yeah,
at the
I think
time
it's relevant,
we
yeah.
review those policies, because I don't know how we could answer that. Or
Trying to be
Director,
consistent.
I hear I get what you were doing, that's fine.
And Dr. Franz, members of the board, I don't know exactly what policies you're referring to, but a great deal of those policies are statutorily driven. And so there may or may not be flexibility with those policies.
All right, I get the impression, if my prior like math is correct, that we are, the will of the board is to leave that language out. So if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second on the table to approve policy 903 as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 5-2. Thank you for the discussion, appreciate it. Moving down to the second set of policies, the 200s, starting with 201, 201.1, 202, 202.1, 208, 10, 11, 13, and 14. Is there any one of those that any member of the board would like to pull out to discuss separately? Otherwise, we can approve them as one.
I still have an issue at 201. it's got conflicting language in there, or both governing and management, and we took our specific statement out to say that the board delegates. So that was that one. The rest of it seemed pretty good. I think that I was okay with the majority of the other ones, except for the fact I don't really remember discussing all of them that are on here. It was a long night. I kind of thought we kind of ended a little bit earlier. But other than that, I had no other issues other than that one.
Okay, well, then we will pull 201 off. And I will entertain it. So actually, 201.1, the school board vacancies. Do you want to provide some clarification on that, Director Johnson? Because it's actually not even, it's not in what we have, and I think there's some intent with the,
It's not in here.
Yes,
Yeah.
201.1 is in here.
okay, so
Yes.
we'll eliminate that one as well.
I think we discussed a procedure on that,
We
so.
discussed removing it, right, as a
And-
policy and
Yeah,
making it
Making
and
it a
bringing it,
procedure.
yeah, to, I think, another meeting to talk about the procedure, so.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve policy 202, 202.1, 208, 10, 11, 13, and 14. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. And then policy 201. I'll entertain a motion to approve policy 201
So made.
Made.
by Director Johnson, second by Director Atkinson. Discussion.
The primary concern was that in the language, we have both, again, it was some of the default language that a lot of school boards have completely taken out now because it was, in my terms last time, kind of word salad. But there was a specific statement in the original one that basically said that the school board delegates to the superintendent the day-to-day administration. So without that, and I know we had significant discussion on that, and that had to do with the powers and duties, where it kind of mixes up, oversees administrative function, and then the next one, C, shall superintendent manage the schools of the school district. And that is usually, when the MSBA put this together, and as I stated, it hadn't been changed in decades. The only thing they really updated was the numbers on the statutes. It was meant to cover really small districts that did day-to-day management, and then school boards that were governing boards like we usually are. So I don't know if there's a reason we shouldn't put that in there, because we can't, if we're going to be a management board, then we're going to go into everything. You can't pick and choose based upon the topic, right? But if we're going to be a governing board, you only do it by exception, when something rises to the level of the board. And by not putting it in there, or using the general language that we see in school districts that we like to quote quite a bit from, it can get a little confusing.
So Chair France, I remember we had a robust conversation about this, and the will of the board coming out of that meeting was to, and I think Director Olsted recommended this, to add on B, which is highlighted in green, the powers and duties. The school board oversees administrative function, adopts and revises policy, and is the final for appealing administrative decisions. Was what the change that was recommended coming out of that meeting. So I think it's not really fair to go back and, how do you say, like, rehash something that we spent probably 45 minutes on talking about. And then the other thing is that the sentence that you are specifically referring to that was in our policy is not in MSBA policy. And it's also not in other boards' policies. So it's delegating that authority when we, as a board, our authority is written in statute, which is what aligns with this policy. So I personally like the way this is written because it's exactly aligns to the law. And if we don't want to follow Minnesota state law for what our authority is, then we can go back and put that sentence in. But I am not supportive of that, because we, as a board, have responsibilities as a board, which are aligned to Minnesota State statute. And so I don't think we need to spend 45 minutes rehashing this when we already did that. And this policy represents the changes that came out of that meeting that night.
So first of all, the discussion I didn't believe was really finalized. And yes, I do appreciate letter B. But it was Director Olsted that also brought up last time that we totally missed out on that. And as I pointed out, this initial statement or template from the MSBA hadn't been updated totally in almost 2 decades that I could find. And other districts don't have this one at all, as was also pointed out. They basically say that it's going to follow statute, and all of the interpretations of, the court interpretations of that statute. But because Minnesota has independent school districts, we kind of determine how we govern ourselves, and that is also in statute. So the original language says we delegate. And in that same meeting, we had questions of whether boards should independently approve each and every facility use, going down into the management level. And that also did not succeed with the will of the board. So I question again, when you have B and C under powers and duties, and we don't say we delegate the functions until it comes, until it rises to the board or appealing administrative decisions, and the next one says we superintend and manage the schools, that's actually a contradiction in statement. That's my question. We either do one or the other. I would choose governing, given the size of our district. We didn't always do that here.
And
Yeah,
that's
when
what I
it
was
was
wondering.
smaller. So that's, yeah.
I appreciate, the points, and that's, I think that, to me, maybe the sticky word here is superintend. Because we clearly do not, as a board, superintend this district. That is Dr.
And
Thomas's
manage the
job.
schools.
We also don't manage the schools
Right.
of the school district. We leave that to Dr. Thomas and his team through the administration in each school. So, I guess, would striking superintend and manage the schools of, and just replace it with govern, be a more accurate reflection of what we actually do?
Well, I want to pull up the statute, because this is very specific to the statute. And I understand, Chair France, you served on a board that was more about delegating authority, right? And this is a different board, right? And there's a reason why boards are in the situation that they are nowadays, because they've delegated a lot of authority away that is not necessarily to be delegated away. So if we can pull up.
I don't want
wanna
to
pull up-
speak for other boards.
What's that?
I don't want to speak for other boards.
No, I don't want to speak for other boards, but I also want to reiterate that there's a lot of boards that have this policy in the state of Minnesota, exactly as it's written, because it follows the law. And that's the thing that's really important, is that we need to follow the law. And so I want to just pull up, if we look under
can I just make a comment?
123B.02.
One second, I'll get to it right now.
I think we need to pull up Minnesota State Statute 123B.02 and read what it says, because that is what our authority is.
And I don't think anybody's questioning ultimately our authority. But there is, words mean things, and we do not superintend the district. I'm gonna have to agree with Director Franz on that point. And we don't manage the schools in the way that everybody thinks of that on a day-to-day basis. And I want the policy to reflect what we actually do and still be within the, I think that's still within the spirit of the statute that you're referring to, because ultimately, if the district is being managed poorly, we have the authority to make a change where is necessary. And so, that's how I'm wondering, I think is it these words that are confusing the issue when they really don't need to? Director
I have it
Johnson?
up. So subdivision 1, board authority. The board must have the general charge of the business of the district, the schoolhouses, and of the intents of the schools thereof. the board's authority to govern, manage, and control the district to carry out its duties and responsibilities and to conduct the business of the district includes implied powers in addition to any specific powers granted by the legislature.
And when I hear that, I hear, our managing the district is delegating day-to-day operations to the people that are, you know, appropriately, skilled in those areas. And so, like I said, I don't think that scratching the superintend and manage the schools of, takes away from the spirit of the law. We do govern the district. Yes, we manage it, but I think there's some confusion on what manage actually means, and I want it to reflect again what we actually do. We govern the district, yes, we manage it through our single employee, and then by extension, the rest of the employees.
Correct. Because
there's not enough of us to manage the district in a way that I think is confusing.
Right, we have one employee, the superintendent, and we direct him, and we have them, just like we do in an organizational meeting, when we delegate the roles to individuals to, you know, do what they need to do in order to manage the district. So to me, words matter, and I would agree with Chair White that if we change C to be govern, that would eliminate the contradiction.
Director Bullion.
I'm just, looking at statute here. What Director Johnson read was subdivision 1. And if you look at letter D so right now we're discussing changing wording in letter C. Letter D, it says the school board shall have the general charge. That is words straight out of the first sentence of the statute. MSBA policy has split that subdivision 1. And I do agree that we are a governing body. That is what the general statement of our policy in A, the school board is the governing body of the school district. I do agree that this language does conflict a little bit. And so I think that we do not operate as a managing board, and so we have to come up with what the language should be.
And personally, I wouldn't be threatened by scratching what I suggested and put govern in. I fully understand our authority. To me, this doesn't take anything away. I think it just makes it pretty clear to the public how we're gonna operate. We certainly have the ultimate authority on every subject that comes before us.
Chair White, does that change then? Okay, I agree with you. I think scratching that and putting govern in there, I don't see that as any kind of a threat. In D, where it says, the school board shall have the general charge of the business of the school district, that too could be muddied into managing.
I think the word general
Charge.
makes that pretty clear, that we are generally in charge of the business of the district, again, through the employee and by extension employees that we have. That language doesn't necessarily
And that
do anything
comes
for me.
directly from the statute.
It is directly stated.
I think that's
in
correct.
subdivision 1.
Yeah, and like I said, many of the school districts, I didn't certainly do an empirical study of all 380-something or whatever school districts, but we used to have that one statement in there that said, we are in charge, but we delegate the day-to-day to the superintendent that we hire. And then we have the right to supersede that as required. And again, what concerns me is that when you talk to the MSBA, they did kind of put a soup in here so that districts can make their own decisions.
Well, then would it be, could I throw this out here? Does anybody have any problem with scratching the word superintend and manage these schools of, replacing with the single word govern?
That's exactly what I was going to recommend.
If everybody's comfortable with
Yep,
that,
I'm
that'd be a
fine with that.
simple, is that a simple change that we can still vote on tonight?
I think
fine
that's
with
good.
that.
I think that works,
School board
because
shall
that,
govern the school district.
To adopt rules, so you just need like the word to.
Yeah, we might have to add.
To
Well,
adopt
this
some
is
rules.
proper-
semicolon, so that's fine.
Okay.
The semicolon works.
The school board shall govern the school district. Okay, that's fine.
Semicolon.
Yep, I'm fine.
Okay.
We good?
Yep.
Yes, I have one other question on this one too.
Okay.
Unrelated, but I agree with that. So under section 4, organization and membership, point B, under section 4,
Four.
organization and membership. There was a B that was about the election cycle. Sorry, let me pull up last meetings. I don't recall discussing why we needed to remove that, and I'm just curious. I'm not sure that I have a strong feeling one way or the other, but.
I think the discussion was that it wasn't part of the legal status of the board.
And it was just procedure.
Yeah, it was more,
it was because we could have changes in mid-year due to changes in somebody resigns, you know, that sort of thing also. That was taken out, as well as a student, no offense, being an ex officio because she didn't legally meet the definition of ex officio.
Yeah, no, B was just the numbered years on regular election cycles where it stated alternative schedule, 4 members one cycle, 3 members the other. So we just decided to remove that because it will be in procedure.
Yep.
Okay.
if we're good with that one change, we have a motion and a second on the table. If there's no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. And we will move down to administrative reports. Are there any tonight? Director Herman?
Yes, I just wanted to call out 2 separate things. First of all, I wanted to call out all the district retirements that we have on the agenda today. We have 10 retirees that represent over 262 years of service with the district, which is quite outstanding. That's averaging, I know I'm not great at math, but I used my calculator. That's averaging over 26 years of service per retiree. So I just wanted to give that a quick call out. That's absolutely outstanding. All the years of service and dedication that they've served to our district in many different roles throughout. And then the second thing I wanted to say, because I failed to say it at the beginning, is just a gratitude for all of our staff. One thing that I've heard loud and clear from staff and administration as we were making those very hard conversations with individuals to let them know that their positions were impacted next year, it was such a sense of camaraderie with staff and really being there to support each other and help lift each other up. And they all came back with the utmost professionalism to be there for their students after receiving some really difficult news. So I just wanted to express my sincere gratitude for all of our staff and all of our different employee groups that have been significantly impacted this year. And I felt, you could feel it coming through all the stories that they're sharing, just how amazing they were to support each other through all that. So I just wanted to thank you to all of our administration and staff for being there for each other.
Thank you, Director Herman, appreciate that. If there's no others, we will move down to board reports. Anybody have anything they want to share? Student council, of course.
Yeah, I just want to wish all juniors good luck tomorrow on the ACT. That's no easy task. And then also good luck to spring sports, which are starting up. We're going to have a great season. One event that I want to highlight is the National Honor Society 5K this year. We do it annually, and this year we're doing it to honor Adeline Shepard, a young girl who passed away last year due to childhood leukemia. And Addie was the pitcher for the Prior Lake 10U softball team, and her natural curiosity and leadership was admired by all, and she never failed to leave a positive mark on everyone around her. For this event, we're collaborating with PLAY and donating proceeds to families of children battling leukemia, directly helping those affected by the disease and hoping to make their tiring days just a little bit easier. So we're working with Addie's family to try to get as much community participation as possible, and we'd love for all of you to join us on that day. We'll also have like a food truck and a raffle, so if you don't want to necessarily run in it, you can come and donate and hang out. I'd also like to shout out tomorrow, Senior Class Committee is going to have a fundraiser at Ado Vice all day, 7 to 2, and we're just raising funds for like prom, senior banquet, events like that. So come pop out and buy something if you're available. Yeah, it's a good excuse. In regards to student council, we have presidential elections coming up this Thursday, which is really exciting. So by then, we'll have a new student representative for the board. And we also have executive board elections the following Monday, so next Monday. So yeah, we'll get to see new leadership coming up. And then, right now, we're just continuing to plan for our spring events, paint wars, pickleball tournament, surf and turf. But one new event that I'd like to highlight is Wellness Week, which would be the week of May 19th. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Student Council is partnering with our Serenity Society at the school in order to hold a week full of full events with the goal of educating our student body about the importance of mental health. So we're planning on bringing in therapy dogs, doing morning yoga, highlighting different mental health tips on social medias, and just stuff like that. Speaking with student councils around our area, a lot of them do these wellness weeks or mental health weeks, and a lot of our kids this year are really enthusiastic about it. So we decided to get that going, and we hope to get a lot of support from local businesses, get lots of donations for giveaways and stuff. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other ongoing board reports? Director Olsted.
Yes, we are on the Southwest Metro Board, still in the throes of strategic planning. We have the monthly meeting tomorrow. Director Mason is sitting in for me. Thank you very much again for doing that, as I have a conflict. So really appreciate that. More to come on the strategic plan as that gets finalized. The Teaching Learning Committee met last week. Kudos to everybody came. It was the first day back from spring break. So appreciate it. We did a really deep download on professional development around READACT, which was really powerful. A lot of really good information that we had presented there. And thank you to everybody who participated in that, because it was really learned so much. I mean, you read a lot, no pun intended, you read a lot about the READACT and you think your basic stuff, and then you learn that information, and it's just really deep down what these teachers are learning about in their professional development. So I really encourage anybody to learn more about that. And then at the risk of, truly not my intent, but at the risk of sounding somewhat tone deaf, I wanted to extend my appreciation for the first powwow a couple weeks ago. My daughter and I attended, and it was so meaningful and very powerful, and I'm just so grateful that that happened. It was very well attended. They had a really good crowd and learned a lot, and it was beautiful. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Director Johnson?
I just wanted, obviously, thanks to all the teachers retiring or, holy cow. I did the math on that too, so Director Herman, you beat me to it. But I wanted to say special thanks to, our athletics director. I've been able to work with him a lot. I was able to go to a PAA meeting for the first time the other day, and just knowing how much those parents know about everything else that he does too. And then he came in here and was able to name every single one of those names of students and do it really well. Just small things like that. You just know that he's just doing great things. And then a special shout out to, I don't think Sam's here anymore, but thanks to everything that he did. He'll be missed. And so yeah, that's it.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Bullion?
I attended, I attended the Caring and Committed Conversations at the Link Center last month. It was a bunch of elementary schools. It's the third time that I've attended that as a board member, and this one was really special. I was really appreciative of the topic being the strategic plan, and listening to all these elementary age students talk about our core beliefs and the pillars of our strategic plan. We sit here in the boardroom and we talk about, I was part of the strategic plan committee, and the desire for it to be a living, breathing document only happens when it is actually talked about and used from the boardroom all the way to the classroom, and then again, having that push out. So I did an RSVP to go. It was the last minute that I could go, and it was my favorite one so far. So that, I attended my first Community Ed Advisory Committee. Director Dahl shared earlier how well attended that advisory committee is. And it truly is. I have been on most of the board or committee meetings, and that committee is very well attended. And the role of community ed in our community is huge. When I first came to Prior Lake in 1999, that's how I submerged myself into this community, and I just really appreciated stepping into that committee. Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Director Franz?
For what hasn't been covered here today is scale. So in the last couple of months of scale, we've had a series, we're about ready to go through our last one on, believe it or not, waste management. And the topic is incredibly complicated, but what it really came down to is we are out of landfill space and have been. And our older landfills are not lined, and they're sinking, they are leaking a lot of toxins into our water, into our groundwater. And so their latest update, and we still have one that goes into the actual organic, our next one is going to be really exciting. I believe it goes in organic decomposition processes, so that'll be cool. But you know, they sent out surveys about improving organics and regular recycling and how important it is in order to stave off as much of the increased property taxes that we will all be going through if they have to find more landfill space. And this is going on not just in our county, but in the state. So that was pretty interesting. And then we had a very exciting breakdown of how our property taxes are determined and the entire process, what goes to where, everything like that. So everyone did get a property tax update or estimate, and then you have so long to basically contest your property tax statement. And they went into a lot of detail. The presentations are online of where the money goes, what the process is, and of course aligning with the needs of who receives those funds, including schools. I do want to shout out that the county is very happy with our school district as well as other school districts and our recycling processes and how many field trips these kids go on to go see the various facilities and how organic recycling works, both from raw food to paper, plastic, et cetera. So that was, they had a lot of pictures of all of our students visiting, and it was pretty fun.
Dr. Mason?
Nothing else from me?
Oh, I just have a couple things. Just a reminder, as the next series of 200s, comes forward, as soon as Director Johnson and Bullion get their drafts out, we'll be very appreciated to get all comments back to them ahead of the next study session, as you are allowed. Certainly there are outliers where something comes to you at the end, but that's fine. But do your best to get those to them before the next study session. I had the rare opportunity to attend the last AMSD board meeting. Dr. Thomas was also in on that video call. The news is terrible for the most part. We may or may not have used more colorful language as we discuss what we saw, but stay tuned. It's not looking super positive in St. Paul right now. And then lastly, just FYI, moving forward, our study sessions, with that new setup that we have that I think everybody thought was fine, we're going to continue to live stream and record, but with a single camera, and I believe a picture-in-picture that'll catch that table for the most part. But Liz will not be back there. We're going to hit record at the start and stop at the end, and the only caveat is there's a chance something could go wrong with the live stream, so we'll kind of just keep plugging along here, and if it works, you know, we'll keep doing it that way. I'll have, I mean, Christie will more than likely put out some kind of a communication to the public to say it might look a little different. We feel like with these mics here, the big complaint I've heard over the years is we can't hear you during the study sessions. That should be alleviated for the most part, but with Liz not being back there, which was part of my goal for reorganizing all of this, there may be a technical issue that just, you know, that this live stream could go and we'd have to post the recording the next day. So we'll take it one meeting at a time and go from there, but I think it'll work just fine and add to that little more casual feel for the meeting that I think we're looking for, so. Future events, our next study session is April 28th at 6. If there's nothing else to come before the board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
By Director Bullion.
Second.
By Director France. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. We are adjourned.